All right, guys, what's up? We've got a super cool guest. The OGs of the kayak fishing community will know exactly who this man is. Um, I first met our guest tonight fishing the River Bass Series, where he absolutely dominated him and his buddy Tim. Some of y'all already know who I'm talking about. But without further ado, we have Lance Coley with us on Road Dogging tonight.
How's it going?
Thank you for joining us, Lance. Over the last year or so, me and Lance have become pretty good friends. We're both kind of number nerds and statistical kind of fanatics. Lance understands that stuff way more than I do, but we've been going back and forth lately about some different things, ranking systems, kind of deals. But he's been helping me with that lately. We'll get to that later. I've got a cool thing to put up on the screen later. But you know, Lance, introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're from, and go ahead and tell us how you got into kayak fishing.
Yeah. So originally from Mississippi, but I've been living in well, went to Atlanta, Georgia for a few years, but ended up in the Birmingham area, Alabama. Been here for 15 years now. Um, so growing up in Mississippi, I waded creeks a lot. Um, did a had like a co-op job in Alabama, and there was a little creek by the plant that I was co-oping at, and went down to the Academy Sports and bought a 9 foot, I think it was a Pelican Vapor.
Yeah.
So I was like, I've been wading these creeks for years. I just figured, we'll try to float it, and I really had no idea what kayak fishing was or if it was a thing or anything at that point. Um, that was like 2004.
Oh wow! So you got in this early. There's a lot of guys that start saying 2014 and that kind of realm. But you're 10 years ahead of me.
Yeah, if you can call fishing out of a Pelican Vapor starting kayak fishing, then yeah, that's about 2004.
Well, 10 years ago I was in a Pelican too. That's that. I think that's how a lot of people got started. Is in a mine actually came from Academy too. Come to think of it.
Hey, I mean the price was right. It was like paddling a log. I mean it roll on you in a heartbeat. But hey, if you want to learn balance, that's the way to do it.
And I bet it had one of those old plastic molded in seats too, where
Oh
your
yeah,
butt cheeks got wet because there was nowhere for the water to go.
oh yeah, yeah. It was terrible boat, but it got me started.
Oh yeah.
Um, so a couple years later, I graduated college. I moved to Atlanta. I was there for a few years. Um, Met Drew Gregory there about 2006, I think.
Now let me ask, how did you meet Drew Greger? Did you meet him on the water, or did you happen to meet him through forums like River Bassin, or how did y'all meet?
Yeah, so back then, way back when, uh, before Facebook and all that was real popular, you had the internet forums. That one in particular was Georgia River Fishing. Um, there was an Alabama River Fishing and a Mississippi River Fishing as well, but the Georgia board was probably had the most traffic, I guess. But
Y'all got a lot of moving water down there. That makes sense.
yeah, I mean that, and you say OG. I mean a lot of those guys don't even tournament fish. Like I don't even. I've lost track of a lot of them. Um, I'm sure life moves on. Maybe they don't even do it anymore. But
Right.
um, a lot of guys that could just flat catch them that just never really got in the tournament scene when that started kicking up. I guess around 2010.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, met Drew. Uh, Upgraded my kayak to a ocean kayak caper. Fished out of those things for years. Um, and then
Ocean kayaks were a big deal back in the day. I don't know the last time I've heard somebody talk about them, but when the kayak fishing stuff started blowing up, like when I was getting into it, like 2012, 2013ish, like if you watch Jim Salmon's, like an ocean kayak was a top tier kayak at the time. You know what I mean? Like You don't ever hear of them anymore. I don't know. You may know more about that than I do, but I don't know the last time I've seen one, let alone have heard somebody talk about one.
I really haven't paid much attention to them, but I would assume they probably just stayed with their niche as a wreck boat.
Yeah.
Um, but guys were just adapting them to fishing. I mean, and back then a fishing kayak was a wreck boat with two rod holders.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're totally different machine now.
Yeah.
And they're literally machines. I mean, there's all kinds of gadgets and stuff on them that you just didn't have back then. There's
There's
lots.
there's still a place for that. We have I'm sure you would probably be think this is probably pretty cool, but we have a local group here in Knoxville called East Tennessee Barebones Kayak Fishing, and there's no pedal systems, no motors, no power poles, no electronics. It's just you, some rods, a kayak, and a paddle, and a life jacket. I mean, that's it is OG, and I try to fish one or two a year, and it there's no Tourney X, there's no apps. It's you show up at a boat ramp underneath the bridge, and everybody shares photos, and there is something nostalgic about that to me that I just
Yeah.
absolutely love when we do that.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a good time. Um,
But the first time I met you, Lance, was I don't exactly remember what event it was, but we're talking early river bassing when you and Tim were dominating. Explain to those kind of what river bassing was, and kind of how that went about. Or y'all went back to back team of the year? Is that right?
yeah, I'll have to test my memory here. It's been a
It's
minute,
it's
but
been a little bit. I know y'all absolutely blew it out of the water that one year. That the championship was at Caney Fork here in Tennessee. But just kind of talk about that. And I know you're a big river guy, but that's you know, to tell everybody about all the places you went for river bassing.
so river bassing kicked up in 2010. I think was the first year, and I won the angler of the year that year. I think there was 5 stops or so. Um, I can't remember where they all were. I know there was one I think in Atlanta. There's one in Birmingham, which I won. And without going back and look at some of my journal
Yeah,
notes.
that's even before I got into it, because I started fishing these events. My first kayak tournament was 2013, so I didn't even realize river bassing was. I thought river bassing was kind of its first year was right along with my first year. I didn't realize river bassing was up and rolling even before I knew about it.
Oh yeah, and river bassing was never really. Um, there weren't really any cash payouts. It was all prizes and stuff like that. I know 2015 we won. I won the Angler of the Year again, and there was a nice. I think it was 10 grand that I won for that. But I think most of it was usually like I had so many coolers and kayaks, and I was just flipping stuff on Craigslist. the The first year I won a little like 2-man camper.
Two
Uh,
man camper.
yeah, so I mean, Drew got some pretty cool prizes for us. So
Drew
yeah,
Drew has always had incredible prizes like that. That's never been short of anything. I remember there was one year, the year that the championship was in Kingston.
mhm.
We're gonna say circa 2015, 2016. I'll lean heavily on 16. But my friends, I don't know if you know Eric Thomas and some guys that I fish with. There were a couple other guys, Brad Crum, who's a river guy that basically just he only fishes when he's not allowed to shoot something in the face, hunting season wise, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, but Brad's an awesome dude. He's went with us to Louisiana a couple times. We've had a lot of fun. A guy that we used to call two star Ben Davis. They partnered up, Eric and Ben, and I think the four of us went first, second, third, and I finished seventh, I want to say. And they won the team, they won the top three of the individual, and they go through all this stuff. And, outside of the long term, like team of the year, angler of the year stuff, they won, um, they won two kayaks, I think, one for the overall. I think they won two. I think one kayak and then two giant Orion coolers. That was a staple at river bassing events. There was always a
Yeah.
cooler that was going home with somebody, and a big one too. And
I
Eric
got
still
two
has
of 'em.
that cooler. What'd you say?
I still got two Orion coolers I use pretty regularly, so they're well built.
They were cool coolers, man. And but I had one. I actually won from something. It was orange and white UT colors. I love that cooler. And somebody stole it out of my truck one time. That's a
Oh,
different story for another day. But um, they won two coolers, they won a kayak, they won all sorts of stuff. And then we're sitting there and everything's kind of winding down, and they go to raffle off a Coosa HD, and they pulled my name out for the raffle for everybody
gosh.
that was there. And I had nowhere to even put this kayak to even go home. So we had to put the kayak on top of Eric's trailer. So he had two boats on there from them fishing that day and floating together, and then two boats that they had won, and coolers. They had coolers strapped to kayaks. They had seats taken off and put in Eric's Suburban, and had coolers strapped to kayaks. That was one of the craziest event check-ins I have ever been a part of ever. Sat there and ate salsaritas in Kingsport, Tennessee, on the banks of Watts Bar.
Yeah, that sounds like me and Tim at I can't remember what event it was, but we had our own boats, and neither one of us had a trailer at the time, and we both won boats at the event. So we had, I think I had them double stacked on top of my Xterra, and then he had one on top of his Tahoe, and the other one, I can't remember, had like a flip down rear glass or something. Just had it shoved up in the back or something.
Yeah, that year where check-in was at Caney Fork, I believe y'all took home everything there is to win for the individual and the entire year's events. I was like, who in the world are these guys? And y'all had it squared away. You would go up there to get something and hand Tim a camera, and Tim would be taking pictures of you, and you get down and swap over, and y'all be taking pictures of each other. And I was like, these boys came here with the 100% intentions to win everything there is to win, and they came prepared with cameras to take pictures of it too.
I mean, that's the way we did it, or at least the way I did it anyway. Tim fished it pretty heavy all the years, but I fished some of them all the years, but I really concentrated on 2010 and 2015. I only have so many resources and so much free time and so much
Yeah.
vacation. So those 2 years, I was like, all right, so I'm winning the AOI this year. I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do.
And I
And
wish, I tried to look one time to go on to River Bassin website and try to get some of those old tournament results and stuff. When I got curious, I don't know, maybe we'll say 6 months ago. It was probably a year ago. We'll go last winter when I didn't have anything to do, and I'm just sitting around. Everybody's bored, getting cabin fever, right?
yeah.
So I actually looked and couldn't find any of that stuff. I was trying to find it to see where all we had went and where I had went, and all this kind of stuff. And that website was down, and I even texted Drew and I was like, hey man, is there any way you could let me know what? And he's like, oh, I could probably pull it up somewhere, but I don't know last time it's been out. You know how Drew is. It was like
Oh
a
yeah.
full blown story of why the web page wasn't open, which was funny. But there's a lot of that stuff I wish we could go back and look at, because it's
Oh, I
one of the
know.
first big trails that went around everywhere. And I don't even think Drew meant it to be a trail at first. It was just kind of like, hey, I'm going to travel around the country and fish a bunch of places and see who shows up, at least kind of the way I felt like at first. And then it like exploded like 2014 or so. Like, you showed up at the Knoxville event, where check-in was at an old kayak shop called Uncle Lim's, which I
Yeah.
don't think exists anymore. But dude, there was like 70 people there or something like that. And that was like, I was like, holy crap, there's 70 other kayak anglers that fish like fish rivers and stuff. I was just like, I can't believe there's 70 people here,
Yeah, and
and
I
it
mean, it
just
was kind of ahead
exploded.
of its, it was kind of ahead of its time a little bit. I'm excited to see what his new stuff's going to do, because I think pulling 40 to 70 people, 10, 15 years ago, I mean, I got to think it's not the same thing, but it's similar, I guess. I'm
Yeah,
excited to see how that's going to turn out.
I think there's definitely like a big a niche for that, and not even like a niche. It's like more of a like a slot. Niche sounds too kind of um, small for the capability that has.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of guys. There's one specific guy I'm thinking of in Pennsylvania that just really gets down with moving water, and he shared a bunch of that stuff. And there's guys like that all over the country, just like my buddy Brad, that would just if he does go fishing, he likes to be on moving water. And you wonder how many guys like that are not going to travel and fish other tournaments because they don't want to deal with bass boats and pleasure boats and stuff like that at these big lakes we go to, that may show up and do small rivers and put their eyes on new waters and stuff like that. So it's interesting to me who that will kind of bring out. And maybe we can get guys like you and Tim back, and look around and look up on the leaderboard and see y'all in different places a little more often.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Definitely get back into my strong suit. I've learned a lot since river bassing went away. I'm a lot, more versatile, I think, as an angler. Just having to fish lakes, fishing some of the other national trails.
Is that going to be your primary focus this year?
Yeah, and again, I'm a family man now. I'm probably not going to chase the whole trail, but I'm definitely going to hit the 3 closest ones. At least that's the plan anyway, Lord willing. I think the Georgia and the Missouri event, and then his national championship, which I assume is Central Tennessee somewhere.
Have you ever been to Missouri? Did any of those old river bassin stops to maybe go kind of where the new one might be, kind of overlapping water somewhere you've actually been over there?
I don't think where he's going this year or in 24 is the same waters, but he did have one, I think, in actually I'm pull up my tournament log. He did go over there. What was that? Was that 2017? Last year? Anyway, he was over there at some point, but it was a different part of Missouri.
Gotcha.
So I think that's going to be totally new water, and he probably intended it that way. That seems to be something he wants to kind of tout for that series, is new water for everybody.
What so you mentioned mostly events closer to home. What's your local kayak trail? Are you Iron City?
Yes, Iron
Yeah.
City. One of the tournament directors for Iron City, along with Dan Perry and a few other guys. Jacob Mott, who is you may not have ever heard of, but he's an absolute hammer. He's won AOI for the 2nd time in a row this year.
Is that the one that edged Dan out? Dan was second in that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Dan got second. I was distracted with ACAT this year, and I was
That's
like,
y'all's more like state level kind of travel, more Alabama trail, correct?
I started ACAT this year with that in mind, to try to hit at least one club's maybe premier event of the season, or one of their more popular ones. Trying to hit each of the different watersheds, different types of fisheries in the state, higher entry fees, bigger purses, and thought it turned out well. We averaged, I don't know, our biggest event was at Smith Lake. We had 29 sign up for the ACAT pot. That's 29 at $110 a pop. So that was a pretty big purse. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know the other events we were averaging anywhere from like 13 to 17. So, but even at that, we were paying out $1,000, just about,
That's not
eight,
bad.
$900,000 to the winner. So,
Y'all don't have an Alabama Bass Nation, correct?
no, for for whatever reason, the Alabama clubs are kind of, they're almost tribal.
Yeah.
I'm using that term in as nice as I can. And
For those that don't know, I chuckle when he says that because they're the they have like intermingling, like they fish each other's trails, but they don't want to have like they don't want to be under like a KBF or cast style for Tennessee. They just kind of want to do their own kind of little thing and then just meet up at the end and just kind of do whatever. And there ain't nothing wrong with that. That's just it's funny. They all have different nuances in their rules and stuff that they're all kind of really. Yeah, I know I've showed up to a few NACA events, which is North Alabama Kayak Anglers, and I remember the first event I showed up down there, had no idea. I just was like, oh, I want to go fish a tournament at Gunnersville on my way to somewhere else, and I showed up. Captain's meetings at like 4:30 in the morning, and they have the captain's meeting before the tournament on Saturday. And you have to have a specific board. You have to have, which then, we all had plastic boards, but they had specific boards that had um,
the bump board
the
sticker.
bump board sticker. Yeah, it was a different type of bump board sticker where it had, North Alabama Kayak Anglers on top, and then or three or four open little squares. And you basically took a Sharpie, they gave you a code, and you wrote it on the bump board. So it was in all the pictures. And I thought that was just like the smartest thing ever at the time. Because that was still like you could show up to a small tournament at that point in time and they might hand out playing cards for an identifier. You remember
Mhm.
those days, don't you, Lance?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that was
Playing
still,
cards.
that was, there might have been Tourney X then. I don't know. But, at that time, having Sharpie and writing it on your board on the bump board, so like it showed up in every fish, was genius to me at the time.
Yeah, and just to backtrack a little on the tribalism, I think this year probably marked an unprecedented level of cooperation among the clubs in Alabama. A lot of the rules have been aligned. It's not to the level of what is it, cast in Tennessee,
Yeah, cast, yeah.
but we aligned a lot of the rules anyway. So there's less chances of people messing up that want to club hop.
And there's a lot of good guys down there. Like that's, I travel and fish all over the place, and Georgia has some, or yeah, Alabama. My bad, not Georgia. Side note, that's y'all are gonna start hating on me now because I got Georgia and Alabama confused. But
Well, lucky for
Alabama
you,
has a.
lucky for you, I'm a Mississippi State fan, so I'm an outsider anyways.
But Alabama has, a lot of really helpful directors down there with you and Dan, the guys from NAC. What is it? The Mayfield
Yeah,
that does the
Nate Mayfield,
Nate,
yeah, Spencer and Sam and Luke and the Coleman group.
Joe Drowns from Yak and
Yeah,
Grass. It's
yeah.
there's a lot of really good dudes that run stuff, and I think it was one of those things where,
Oh
at
yeah,
some point
Steve
in
and
some.
Ryan down at River Region too. They're
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've met them a whole lot, but that's probably the one just because they're so much further away.
yeah.
They're definitely the furthest group from me, and I don't even know what the closest I've even fished in Mobile is. It's probably not close. Probably
Well,
Pensacola is probably the closest I've been. That was for
they're in
redfish.
Montgomery, so they're not quite to Mobile, but
Hmm.
there's Mobtown in Mobile that I think they're pretty new. Um, but
Gotcha. I think that might be the one Garrett Wade was talking to me about this weekend. That might have been why it was fresh on the brain.
yeah, I think he's down there, or I think he's
But
fishing anyway.
Yeah. The a bunch of good dudes down there. Joe actually brought me an identifier at like 10 o'clock at night when I was fishing his the native and yak and grass event. He actually brought me a native identifier at like 10 o'clock at night. I was sleeping in my truck in the Walmart parking lot and was sitting there looking through, and I'm like, identifier, what in the world? I'm like, I'm missing something here. So I text him and I was like, hey man, I said, I know you told me if I ever needed anything when I was down here, to give you a call. And I was like, I may need something, but I'm not 100% sure I need anything. I'm kind of, I'm up a creek and I don't know whether I'm trying to go down or still trying to go up. And he's like, man, I'm only, 10 minutes or so. I can meet you at this gas station. I've got extra ones printed out. And I'm like, let's go, and
Cash.
that event worked out great, so, shout out to Joe. There's a lot of good directors in Alabama, and I've been fortunate to meet quite a few of them. But what's the furthest you've ever went? We'll kind of get back on track here, right? Back on the questionnaire. That's not really a questionnaire. It's just whatever. But what is the furthest you kind of went? Is one of those river bassin events the furthest you went to, or have you went to something else that was further away? What's the furthest Lance Coley's ever made it?
The furthest is, let's see. Well, I guess to give a kind of a global thing, I fished in 19 different states. I'm I'm a nerd. I track everything.
We're gonna get to that, and people are gonna find out. We're gonna say that to the end. I got graphics for that.
Well, I keep a logbook of all my tournaments and where I go. I've fished in it's up to 262 rivers and creeks in 19 different states. That's not counting
That's
the lakes.
awesome.
I hadn't counted the lakes, the new lakes I've fished over the past 4 years since I started, some of the Hobie and bass stuff and everything else. But I guess the furthest would be Susquehanna. I think it might have been the last river bassin event in 2016, I believe, was on the Susky. So that was pretty far away. Other than that, I've been to parts of Florida, which I know I'm in Alabama, but Florida's like 13 hours long.
Yeah, no kidding. No
um,
kidding.
been out
And that's
to
a boring drive too. I don't care where you're from. That's a terrible drive.
yeah, it is. Went to PK in Texas for the bass event. Here's a funny one. So, back when river bassin it was one of the, it kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit. One year it was mostly online tournaments, I think.
Yeah.
And he had a regional, regional online tournaments. And one of them, he did just like a general out west tournament. And I don't think anybody out west really knew what river bassin was. So there was like 8 people signed up for it. But it just happened to be the year that my buddy got married, and he wanted to go to Vegas for his bachelor's party. So I'm like, what kind of rivers are in the Vegas area? So I got to looking around leading up to this bachelor party trip, and ended up planning my arrival and departure around winning this Western River Bassin online tournament. Ended up flying into Phoenix, Arizona, and the Salt River runs through Phoenix, and I found out that there's bass in it, and I'm like, no, I wanted to drive from Phoenix to Vegas anyway, just to sightsee a little bit, because I'd never been in that part of the country. So I flew into Phoenix, rented an inflatable kayak. I packed my reels in a small tackle box. I bought like a $15 rod from Walmart, and I went fishing on the Salt River and won that online event.
Oh my gosh, that's freaking awesome. Arizona fly-in river event and somewhere you'd never seen before.
Never
Did you catch any good ones?
I caught like a 19 that day. So yeah, it was some surprisingly good quality in that. I mean, it was basically, you imagine water's pretty scarce out there, but I think they basically would pull water for the city of Phoenix out of this river, and it would be dry for like several miles, and then it would discharge back into the river as treated water. I was fishing the treated water outflow. And then several miles downstream of that, irrigation pulls the water out again. So there's only like stretches of this river that even have water.
Holy crap.
But yeah, I was fishing the stretch between the treated water discharge and the irrigation intake pumps or whatever.
That is wild.
But yeah,
that is an all timer right there. I feel like you had told me sometime when we were having like, we were staying for KFL event or something, and we were talking about places we've been. I feel like you brought up fishing in Arizona, but I don't think I realized you went out there to fish an event, and won it, let alone, go out there, but to win it, show up and win it.
Again, it was 8 people, so it wasn't but still.
I mean, that's pretty cool either way. There's a lot of guys that snipe those online events constantly that have, their little honey holes where they go drop 100 inches every month. But that was, quite a few years ago, so there's not as many people dropping 100 inches. That's still, that's a cool story. I was like, oh yeah, I flew to Arizona and caught some, how long of a flight did you have out here to Vegas? Oh, I actually flew into Phoenix and won a tournament and then just drove up here, guys. It's good to see you. Like, what?
Basically.
So would you consider yourself a finesse guy or like a power fishing guy? Because I feel like what little I know you, I don't actually know the answer to this question. I would probably say fairly neutral.
Yeah, I would say that. I favor power fishing, but I'm not afraid to finesse fish. Generally, my method is to power fish until I find something, and then if I feel like, if I catch something on a spinnerbait, usually before I move on, instead of just powering through trying to catch more on spinnerbaits, I'll pick the area apart a little bit. I'm not going to sit there all day, but I'll flip a jig or creature bait or something around just to see if there's anything I can clean up. Because, I mean, your course mobility now is a lot easier than it used to be with motors.
Oh yeah.
But I guess that's something I just learned, being in a paddle craft most of my, I won't call it career, but for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Kayak tenure.
Yeah. It just taught me to not be afraid to slow down. It's not my first choice, but I do use it as cleanup, and if the bite's tough, I'm not afraid to pick it up.
What you're kind of a spinnerbait guy. Is that your primary go-to? Lock it in your hand if you're somewhere new.
Yeah, a lot of times that is, and it can be a little situational. I found it's more situational on lakes. If I have current, I'm not afraid to throw it all day.
Oh yeah.
Lakes, it's wind, shade, whatever.
Yeah.
They tend to have their situations where they shine better. I may pick up a chatterbait. I like the cross-eyes chatterbaits because I can double them as a jig. I can flip them and then roll them back. Love topwater, spooks and ploppers, buzzbaits. I'm a little more diverse in my tackle these days, but for a long time, I'd have 3 rods. I'd have a button, and I'd call it my skirts. Buzzbait, spinnerbait, jig. That's all you need. You got top, middle, and bottom.
Oh yeah.
And that did me a lot of good for many years.
Oh yeah. That's I don't throw a jig probably nearly as much as I should. A lot of times if I'm, flipping or dragging the bottom, I've got some, big Texas rig or something that I'm, flipping around. Which is crazy because, growing up fishing with my dad, fishing boat tournaments and just fun fishing, that was all my dad wanted to do was, go flip a jig. So, it's funny to think about that, and how little I probably throw it when I know I probably should throw it some more. But the skirts, I like that. I'm gonna have to use that because I do throw a buzz bait and a spinner bait or thunder cricket a lot. So I'm gonna have to incorporate that, and got my skirts with me. Of course, then again, if I got all this long hair and I start putting up in my hat like this, somebody might accuse me of something that they shouldn't. If I
Yeah, you
start talking about my skirts and my kayak.
just got to be careful when you use that terminology.
Don't use that around Sisto or Lambert or anybody that can give me a hard time that just loves messing with people.
Yeah, those hard times come, especially when you win a lot.
Hey, I'll dish it out, so I got to take it. I know how it goes. That it's I'm that guy. I deserve a lot of what comes to me. I'm fully aware of that. So what's your favorite place you've ever been to? I know we've had a little bit of this conversation before. But what's your favorite? You can even rank them 1, 2, 3 if you got a couple that you can't decide on.
Mm, I mean that I knew this question was coming, and I still don't know the answer to it. Um, I if I can speak in general terms, and then maybe get more specific after this, but I am most at home on small water, and not just from a proficiency standpoint. I just love it. I like getting in
Yeah,
the water. I like wading. I like um, being able to almost see everything. Um, I like sight fishing. So any small creek or river in the southeast is my favorite place to go.
that's
um,
awesome.
I got the Cahaba River here in my backyard, and it's not really a world class fishery. It's amazing biological treasure. It's one of the most biologically diverse watersheds in the world, much less the nation.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, it's full of spotted bass, and you can catch some nice ones every once in a while. But
Yeah.
I like going there just because I feel more connected to that type of water.
Oh yeah.
Um, the Susquehanna, I've only been once. That was an amazing place.
Oh yeah.
I would love to
Definitely.
go back one day. Um, that's a pretty good trip. So maybe once my son's out of the house or something, I'll start making those longer trips again. Um, but yeah, you could probably name any river that's got bass in it, and I'll just say it's my favorite place.
That's fair. There ain't nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of small places like that don't deserve to get mentioned because they will get burnt and have their
Mhm.
own hidden gems of places that most people would never expect, and that's what makes them so special.
Yeah.
So going back to your statistical love of numbers, we're going to go ahead and get into one of the cooler things I think that you have done, or just really anybody's done. Everybody's pretty much everybody's familiar now with the KBN rankings at the end of the year every year. Um, Something that Lance did last year with the KFL was do power rankings for the KFL teams for 28, or it was about how many there was, 28 give or take.
Yeah, I think 28 or 24, something like that.
And Lance would have this incredible spreadsheet constantly of power ranking all the teams, and I thought that was just awesome. I'm a numbers guy. A lot of people don't know, and some of y'all ain't gonna believe I was on the math team one time in high school, and I was an alternate, but it still counted. So I like numbers, obviously, but Lance put together something really cool this year. He called it the Alabama Kayak Bass Trail Power Rankings. Is that right? Did I hit it all right?
I think so, something like that.
Something like that. It's power ranking the best kayak fishermen in Alabama. Short
Right.
short version. So I'm gonna put this graphic up here, let y'all kind of look at it, and let kind of Lance talk about how he went about this. So there's the graphic. It's probably going to be hard to see. Some of y'all might be able to see it, but Lance, tell us a little bit about how this came to be.
So I guess I was kind of building off what I did for the KFL, and that and this is roughly based off like the NCAA RPI calculation that they use to seed tournaments, where that takes into account both your record, your competitor's record, and your competitor's record. So it's got a strength of schedule element to it, but it relies on head-to-head matchups. So it's with KFL we had head-to-head matchups between we had team versus team, so it was pretty
Right.
easy to do. But over the winter, I was like, there's got to be a way to do this for individual anglers, and I just kept thinking about it, and I was like, it's possible. It's gonna be a lot of data, but it's possible. So I just decided to take all the tournaments in Alabama and break them down basically into head-to-head matchups. So if 40 people sign up, then you have, I guess, 39 head-to-head matchups for one angler, and then 39 head-to-head matchups for the second. I mean, it's I think
It gets out of control in a hurry.
it's a lot of data, and I think just in Alabama with our 5 main clubs in the north part of the state, I didn't include Mobtown because they're kind of isolated down there, and the method requires some cross competition to keep everything even,
Right.
make it calculate correctly. So, but even with just the 5 clubs, and each club averaging probably 6 or 7 events a year, and 20 to 30 people an event, I think I had somewhere around 15,000 head-to-head matchups to calculate.
That's
So
crazy.
it's a ridiculous amount of data. But once I got everything set up, it was just a matter of copying and pasting everything and getting it in there. But anyway, I guess beyond that, I'm having to adapt something that was built for college sports to fishing, which isn't exactly apples and oranges. So I made some of my own tweaks to try to represent it a little better, at least in my eyes. And so it is my kind of my own thing. It's based off the RPI, but I've got some tweaks in there. For instance, the consistency index and the A game index. Consistency index is probably the most like the RPI because that takes every head-to-head matchup that an angler does and comes up with that number.
And that's basically their head to head against everybody that they could go head to head against. That's their, you know, winning percentage essentially. Like is that
It's
kind of typically what that is?
it's not really a winning percentage because the RPI is it takes into your account your record, your competitor's record, and your competitor's record. So your record may be, 0.8. You might win 80% of your matchups, but maybe you fish against people that don't do well most of the time. So the second factor is 0.3 because they only, as a group, they only win 30% of their matchups. And then you also your competitors as well. So you take all those and put them together as a weighted average, and that's how you come up with these numbers. So as you can tell, it's pretty tight. It's hovering around, 0.5 for the most part.
Yeah,
But
these numbers are close. I mean, if you start looking at them, you know, some of them are obviously they're highlighted blue for those that are looking at the table. There's some obviously the darker blue the better, and they kind of get towards a white neutral if they're kind of in the center. A lot of these numbers are or a hundredth of a point apart or a tenth of a point apart or something to make such huge differences of where they are, and a lot of them ain't even that far. I mean, some of these that are in the red are 0.45, and Dan, who's dominating some of the consistency index, is like a 0.58. So
So
they're really close still.
in I wouldn't concentrate too much on the actual value of the number. It's just a comparison thing.
Right.
Um, and you can kind of see on the right with the bars how those actually look as far as
When you're comparing them kind of against themselves, right? Kind of
right.
a spatial, a little bit more spatial awareness on those.
Yeah, you can kind of yeah, exactly. You can get a better idea of how they relate to each other instead of out to the third or fourth decimal point. But the number itself doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, it is built off those records, but since there's so many matchups, um, at some point you start getting into the 50-50 odds
Yeah.
coming in because just there's so many numbers and you
Right.
end up statistically like you're going to win half of them. So it does get tight, but the way the names came out just from like the eye test, I think I agree with the order that it spit out. Like if you ask me who had the best year, Dan Perry easily.
Yeah. And
Um,
you can see that in a lot of like the comparisons where um guys that fish a lot of events, guys like Chuck Wise, guys like what is it, Sam Cox, I think fishes a bunch of events in
mhm.
Alabama, Dan, um names that more people may recognize just from seeing them on leaderboards. You can see that in one of these matchup columns where they've got a dark blue line. They've got over 400 matchups where they're kind of comparing other events. I mean, some of these guys fish 17 events just within the state of Alabama this year,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of rewards kind of more of a consistency index, right? Where guys that are fishing more are kind of slightly rewarded more based on
Yeah,
if they are consistent.
there's a there's a little bit of a performance bump based off the number of. It's not big because I didn't want it. You just if you
Right.
fish a bunch of events, you automatically do well in this index. But recognize that some guys cherry pick their events and they may fish 5 events that year, but they fish 5 events that they know they're going to do well at.
Right.
But if they go to any other lake, they may not do that well. So I didn't want to make those the cherry pickers stand out too much, um, because again, just from that eye test, how I actually feel, how people perform in general. When I did it without that, it had some guys that are way up that I'm like, they're good, they're really good on their home body of water, but when they get out, maybe they're not as consistent. So
You
kind
kind
of
of
break.
combated that on that file. So spoiler alert, Lance actually kind of shared what he was kind of doing with me, and I was looking at it. I'm trying to do one for the state of Tennessee, right? So some of y'all are going to hear that and be like, "Oh gosh, what is going to come from that?" But there is like y'all in Tennessee know, like Lance just said, there's 15,000 data points and 5 clubs in Alabama. Well, I basically sent out a bunch of messages and emails. There are 10 cast clubs, a couple clubs that are not in cast. I'm going to include Tennessee Bass Nation because a lot of those guys, that's our chance to compete against each other, throughout the state. So I'm looking at like 13 series trails that I'm gonna incorporate, and some of those are small, some of those average 10 or 12 people, and some of those like the Bass Nation, I mean they average like 80 people or something like that. So um, I'm gonna be up to my eyeballs in data for the next little bit, trying to kind of re excuse me, trying to repeat what Lance has done in Alabama. um, Obviously we've got a great group of guys in Tennessee and a lot of events, so I think that's um, a kind of a fair thing to do for Tennessee to try to see kind of how that goes. But um, one of the things I noticed Lance did to kind of combat, what we were just talking about was have like a home field advantage. Wasn't that kind of on that sheet somewhere where there's a minor adjustment for, if somebody is not fishing against a bunch of other people?
Yeah. So NCAA RPI, they account for a home field advantage. So I thought it'd be, I guess, status quo to include that here, and I think it probably does hold true to some extent. Um, NCAA, I think it's different for the different sports, but I think it's usually around 10 to maybe 15%. I decided just to use 5 because I don't know really how much home field advantage really works in fishing, because I think it has to do with water body type more than anything. But
Right.
considering that some people just have honey holes that they know they can go to, I wanted to do something. So basically, if you're the spreadsheet calculates what your home club is based off where the most matchups you have are. So I had the most, I fished in 3 different clubs, but I had the most matchups in Iron City, so that's what it assigned to me. It does that for everybody. So if I would go to a Coleman event and fish against guys that it says that has the most matchups in Coleman, then I'm at an away game, so I get a 5% bump. If there's a guy there that's also at Iron City, I don't get a bump against him because we're both away. So,
Gotcha. That makes
so
sense.
that's how that works.
Yeah, I wasn't
And
sure exactly how that worked. If that was was like a percentile detractor of where you fished locally, or if it was a, you know, a bump, additional, kind of for away, which you explained was an additional bump away. So
yeah,
that actually, learn me something when you did that. So, is there anything else you'd like to talk about on the spreadsheet? Some of y'all can see, kind of how many events some of these guys fish, but
so one of the A game index, the overall power index, how it's ranked, and it's the average of the consistency in the A game index. I think I explained the consistency index, and it's got a lot of those little tweaks in it. The A game index is basically, um, I developed a point system that grades everybody on a 100-point scale. Um, and so what I did is I took everybody and put it on a master AOY list for their 5 best events. So I think Chuck won 5 events this year, so I think he actually had 500 points. So like he was perfect score.
that does
Um,
not surprise me with Chuck at all.
so, but everybody else, somewhere below 500 points, and then I just normalized that range of 0 to 500 points to the same range of the consistency index, that 0.45 to 55, just to get the numbers similar enough where I could average them. If you notice on that one, Chuck's A game is the highest number, but he's not as, I think he's the only one that has a 0.55. Um,
Yeah, there was
yeah,
there was another one that was really high too.
yeah.
Wayne
Wayne
Harris.
Harris, he is a River Region master, but he wasn't, and not that he's not a great angler. I think he's just, I think a couple of events just didn't treat him very well, but because he actually he doesn't travel much, but usually when he fishes out, he still does pretty well. But for whatever reason this
We've
year,
got a go ahead.
for whatever reason this year, every time Wayne left River Region, he didn't do well. So his
We've got some
consistency
guys
index
like
is
that,
very
man, that are hammers. I'm guys that like we got a guy here locally, Joey Berry. He doesn't leave Watts Bar or Chickamauga a whole lot, but man, when he does, he still hammers them. He actually fished the Bassmaster down there in South Carolina for the Classic and had like a 8th place or something like that. And that was, that was one of those events where it's like, oh, we're gonna see whether he travels or just fishes Watts Bar Chick, and he shows up down there and wrecks them, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, the dude's a hammer. Not that we didn't know that, but there's always that aspect of does this guy just fish here in these few, couple lakes? Does he know this lake really well, or does he, know how to catch him? You know what I mean? And that's not, a knock to any of those guys, but everybody has their different priorities of how they want to go about learning a lake or learning a fishery or learning a river system or whatever it is. So,
And
um,
that's why I wanted to break it out into and a consistency index to the guys that are pretty good everywhere, but recognizing that you got guys that are specialists or um, they're homebodies and they don't fish a lot of tournaments, but they're really good at what they do. I didn't want, especially when I had that kind of massaging number in there, to give people that have more events a little bit more buffer, because part of that is the more events you fish, the more likely you are to screw up. So it kind of gives those guys a little buffer on that end too. But for the guys that are really good at their home events, they're specialists, or really good on a particular lake, or they're really good under certain conditions. Um, I'll pick on Chuck. Chuck doesn't seem to do very well in the Tennessee River system. So he fished like 3 or 4 tournaments up there and didn't do very well at all. But he won 5 events this year. So on water that he's good at, he's really, really good at.
oh yeah,
So that A game, when you're on your A game, watch out. I got that index in there, averaged with the consistency index, and that was the best way I could come up with to give a good overall indication of how good an angler was.
absolutely. Well, I'm excited to get, I've got um, got 4 or 5 trails that have probably sent me their info, or I've either gathered their info off Tourney X myself, copy and pasting because I couldn't sit and wait for them to send it to me, so I kind of did it the hard way. But I'm so interested to see how that kind of turns out for Tennessee and kind of how that shakes out, because I don't know all the guys on the Alabama, and sometimes I'll just pull it up and just kind of look at it and be like, A, I'm trying to understand what's going on so I can duplicate it myself for Tennessee, and B, man, that's a lot of information. That's really cool because at the end of the day, I'm just enthralled, I guess, or whatever the word I'm looking for, by just the amount of work that just went into that spreadsheet to get all that stuff together and all the tables and stuff that it's in there.
Yeah, it was quite an undertaking. It took several months to pull it all together, really. Just working on it here and there when I can. So, but now that it's built, it still takes some work to input data and move stuff around to make the calculator work correctly. But it
Yeah.
shouldn't be as big a deal moving forward.
Let's hope not, right?
Hopefully, other than the massive amount of data input that you have in Tennessee, hopefully it'll spit something out that's
I'm
meaningful.
I'm so excited to see that. One of the things that I think is, we talked about, the more you can compete against each other, the better. And, that's one thing that I think we've got so many clubs in Tennessee and guys compete against each other constantly. And then uh, we have the ability to pull in the Tennessee Bass Nation, where we go against all these different places. I'm pulling in a couple charity events like Fishing for Soldiers, where a lot of the guys are all fishing one event at the same time, which doesn't normally happen too. So we actually have a lot of this intermingling of different guys from different places all fishing at the same time on the same body of water. So that should be able to kind of get a better comparison of all that based on the cross referencing and you know fishing against different anglers and another angler's record and all that. You explained to us that I'm not nearly able to explain as well as you did, but I can't
What
wait to see what it looks like.
you almost think of it as like out of conference or cross conference play. That's the way the RPI would treat it. People fishing across different clubs, and it kind of requires that for the calculation to really work well. You got to have something to compare across the entire population, which is why I left Mobtown out, because they're so far down in South Alabama that nobody really fishes down there, and they don't really fish up here. So it would have been just a data set just stuck in the middle of it, and it may not have been representative of how they would fare or how we would fare down there. So you got to have some folks crossing club boundaries to make it work, which most states probably do, or at
Yeah.
least I know Alabama and Tennessee does.
Yeah. Well, what are your plans? We'll kind of ease our way out of here. What's your plans for next year? We talked, the kind of new revamped river series that Drew's running is. You got any other plans? You gonna Iron City again next year? You think?
Yeah, still planning on helping run Iron City. We usually do 6 or 7 events a year around the Birmingham area. Um, uh, going to do ACAT again, which is the kind of the high roller pot. Probably 5 events again, and that makes a pretty busy year already. So that and probably 3 of Drew's events, that'll pretty much fill me up. I'll be somewhere around. I think I had 12 events this year. I'll probably be 12 to 15 next year.
I got you. Pretty
Oh,
solid.
Bass is
That's
coming to Gunnersville, so I'll probably try to do that one again too.
Yeah, I will definitely see you there on that one. I don't know how many more events we will run into each other next year, but I can promise you we will see each other at that one.
Hey, come down and fish some ACAT events. It'll be worth your entry fee.
Yeah, $1,000. I'm down. I need to come down there and try to take some of Chuck's money because me and Chuck conversate a lot. We've still got, believe it or not, we still got a Coosa Kingfisher group text. For those at home, Lance is in that, and I give Chuck a hard time. And I know me and Papa Joe go back and forth when we're out trying to meet up at national events, but the Coosa Kingfisher group text still lives, and I need to come take some of Chuck's money.
I'm glad we still got that going. By the way, that's one of my favorite things.
Absolutely, there'll be some days I've got it muted, right, because when it goes off,
Right.
and it will be quiet for like a month, and then one day you'll just open up your phone, 114 unread Facebook Messenger messages, or whatever it shows. It's like, what on earth? And you don't know whether Joe McElroy is going to be sending memes, or Nick Dyer is posting ratfish, and we get into spotted bass conversation about legality of Coosa spots or this and that. So it is an all or nothing group text, and sometimes it goes off like any group text. But it's a great group of guys that I wouldn't have known, if it wasn't for KFL. So
Yeah.
shout out to the Coosa Kingfishers. That was a lot of fun. But um, go ahead.
I say caca.
Cacaw, the Joe Cacaw. That I need to get that like on a clip. That's what I'm gonna get to like play us out or something. Is Joe McElroy just doing them? Cacaw.
Get the hair
All
sweep.
righty. Yeah, get the hair sweep. We can do it side by side. Papa Joe. Well, Lance, we are slightly over an hour here. We will wrap this up. I really appreciate you coming on and joining me. One of the OGs of kayak fishing has been doing this basically twice as long as I have, which seems crazy because I feel like an OG until we get an actual OG in here and they start talking about events that I didn't even know happened. So shout out to Lance. He's been super helpful with a lot of stuff over the last few years of having different perspectives of fishing new places and big numbers guy. So we're gonna try to knock out this Tennessee power ranking stuff. So thank you,
Good luck.
Lance.
Thanks for having me on, Jordan.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you. All righty. Thank you, Lance, for coming on road dogging. Um, as always, we will have a super fantastic guest next time. Somebody who is maybe not on some of the other podcasts and bigger, KBN and stuff like that. Somebody that can come on and tell some fun stories about, going and fishing a tournament in Phoenix on their way to a bachelor party in Vegas. So, um, as always, I will see y'all next time, and Road Dog is out.